be a very positive step in the right direction. Because of that, one of the things that you all need to know is that we have no mute button by all of the attendees. So you will not see that mute button near your name. That does not mean you are not muted. We have taken care of the mute for you. So we will ask everyone to not worry about whether or not they're muted. We will take care of that for you. Two other things. One, when you are asking questions in the chat box or the Q&A box, please make sure to address them to either everyone or all panelists so we can see them. Those are the two ways that we can see those questions. If not, we might not be able to see them. So we really want to make sure that this is a more positive experience for everyone, that we can have these discussions, and that we think this new format will make it a clearer, more concise office hours. So with all of that out of the way, thank you all for joining us today on this Wednesday. And we're going to start the way we always do after I've been told that I sound like a principal reading announcements with Commissioner Turner.
Thanks, Kara. Appreciate everybody that's joined today. Certainly look forward to the discussion. I know that we did get a lot of questions in. Kara had shared those with me earlier today, and there's been a high round of participation. So appreciate everyone being involved in submitting questions. I hope that you had a good week last week. Again, I just want to emphasize again how much we appreciate our DSPs and the folks that work with you every day. And I certainly hope that you passed along my greetings to them and thanked them from the bottom of my heart for the engagement that they have with our population every day. So with that, I'll turn it back to Kara. I certainly want to jump into these questions. As she said, if you've got questions, please put them in the chat box so we can see them. But we're looking forward to trying to have a good, robust discussion today. And we'll start with the questions. Thanks, Kara.
All right, so the first question we had was about medication administration and the availability of initial med admin classes. The person says there's only one class being offered in Knoxville per month, and with a max roster of 14 students, these spots fill me up quickly. When can we expect additional classes to be added to the rotation so that a meaningful number of staff can be appropriately trained to administer meds for people supported? Dr. Davis, would you like to address this question? And just so you know, panelists are muted, so they will have to unmute to talk.
Yes, Kara, thank you. We have extended the approvals for people who were previously certified through December 31st as of now. And so we are working to get more classes scheduled during the span to address the backlog that we have. We're evaluating whether or not we need to extend that deadline to further into 2021 and discussing that with the governor's office at this time. As it relates to persons who are needing initial training, we are also working on both angles to try to establish a no contact, no physical contact approach to this. We expect to have something within the next few weeks to address that matter and to be able to minimize the amount of contact that people have to receive this training. And we hope that with that, we'll also be able to expand the opportunities to get it. So that's where we are with that right now, Kara.
Thanks so much, Dr. Davis. We appreciate that. The next question we had was about, with DSP Recognition Week having just concluded, the concept plan joint paper references a goal to increase the capacity, competency, and consistency of the direct support workforce. How does the department envision achieving that goal, and how will providers be involved in this process? Some of this work has been ongoing for quite a while through the QUILTS program, and I'm sure that Deputy Commissioner Jordan Allen can talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. Thanks, Kara. Good morning, everybody. So workforce development, as Kara mentioned, obviously has been a focus for the last several years with the DSP workforce already at fairly critical levels. I think that first and foremost, the intent is to continue discussions and strategies around better utilizing that workforce. I think that some of the concepts and changes that we've already talked about through that workforce development group and other formats certainly involves figuring out how we can use direct support professionals and how we can figure out staffing supports and ratios in a way that obviously meets the needs of people supported, but doesn't necessarily adhere to a strict staffing ratio by default, rather kind of direct staff to the needs of people supported. Certainly from a competency and capacity development standpoint, I think some of the conversations that we want to begin to have is about equipping DSPs with the skills that they need to begin to facilitate some of the services and supports that are available. Obviously, enabling technologies are a big part of that discussion, and even staffing strategies that support multiple enabling technology residential environments. There's a group, for instance, right now that's working through one of our pilot projects with a guy named Jerry Bernard, and his whole approach to setting up staff and essentially facilitating outcome achievement and direct supports across their organization looks far different than the way our current staffing models are set up. So we're certainly going to be introducing curriculum into the training programs that equip staff to understand how technology can support people in their daily lives, understand the technology that's available, and then be party to the development of technology assessments and helping facilitate some of that technology-based support services into plans for people that are open to that and desirous of greater degrees of independence. We think that that will impact staff bodies on an agency level and a system level. And we also think that by providing kind of a new track forward as it relates to training DSPs and professionals, we can improve some of the consistency in that staff and the way people are going about their business across the system. All of that, I think, will begin in discussion in earnest here very shortly. We've referenced a couple of times already, and I'll reiterate that we plan to release a waiver overview document this week that will hopefully provide kind of that next level of discussion points and try to gain some momentum in scheduling of stakeholder feedback sessions and idea sessions. We're starting a new group also called Partners in Innovation, and we've sent out invitations to several providers to sit down and participate in that work group. So the next 6 weeks or so, I think we'll really be beginning those discussions, and workforce development will be a primary component of that.
Thank you very much, Jordan. And he's going to stay on the line for a little while because the next question is also about integration. And regarding the October meetings, in what fashion will feedback and input be solicited from participants during the October meetings? Will there be small group processing? And how will information gathered from those meetings be used exactly during the build of the concept of integration? Jordan, you want to start on this one, and then I'll add some stuff afterwards.
Sure. So as most of you probably have seen already, we've scheduled the next round of discussions and feedback sessions, and those are occurring, I believe, on October 2nd. Then we're doing a family-only meeting because that was so successful last time, and we felt like that was such important dialogue with people supported in their families. And then we've also scheduled individual sessions with the advocacy agencies and some other groups on the 13th. So between now and mid-October, we certainly will be discussing the waiver overview document that we'll release here shortly and begin scheduling kind of that next round of feedback. Also, it's worth pointing out that we're going to be continuing the strategic leadership group discussions. As I referenced, we're starting a new group that is made up of provider agencies within the network called Partners in Innovation to begin discussing some of the program concepts and ideas that we can come up with relative to this single system design concept. So I think, again, over the next 6 weeks or so, we're going to schedule new sessions. We'll solicit feedback, and then Kara and her team take that feedback, of which thus far we've received a ton, And Kara, you can describe a little bit about how you guys process and aggregate and synthesize all that feedback.
Sure thing. And a couple of things I want to add. First of all, in conjunction with the overview document that Jordan has referenced, we'll also be releasing a feedback summary. As you all know, we did get a lot of feedback, and I talked a little bit about it in last week's open line about some of the feedback that we gathered. So we are going to be releasing another document that is a feedback summary document, so you all can see how people responded to these questions, where we had a lot of responses, where you know, and kind of the mass of responses, and most importantly, how that feedback impacted what you're going to read in the overview document. So you can see, basically connect what was given to us and where we went from there in the overview document, because we do think that's very important. For those of you who have not seen, and Jordan mentioned, we do have 2 meetings, October 2nd, which will be a larger overview for the entire stakeholder community on this overview document and some of the things that are involved in that. That will give people an opportunity to ask questions. It's from 12 to 1:30. We did extend it for a half hour instead of doing just an hour. We're doing an hour and a half because we realized there were a lot of questions last time. We didn't get to answer all of them. So we're hoping that adding some time will give some more time for Q&A. And then in addition, we'll be doing that family-focused one specifically for families on October 13th from noon to 1:30 Central as well. So those are some of the ways that we are going to be presenting this information. We will do another form stack so that we can continue to collect this input and do another round of stakeholder input, because we do want to hear, as we're continuing through this, the different ways, some of the different things that stakeholders are telling us, so that we can synthesize that information and then bring it to the table as far as when we're discussing further design. So, so those are some of the plans that we have. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any further questions about that. One other thing, when we do release the overview document, we will be also sending a letter, distributing a letter to families in both employment and community first choices and the 1915C waivers. And we would ask for your assistance in distributing that letter. We want them to know about the opportunities they have to listen to some of the things and know about some of the documents that are out there. So we just want to make sure that you all understand, and we appreciate your partnership in helping us reach the families and the people that we support with this important information. So thank you. Okay, next question is about testing. The Everlywell testing has been very valuable to our agency, and we appreciate making this testing available. Understanding there is still a lot of uncertainty about COVID-19, is there a time frame on how much longer these kits will be available? Dr. Davis, I think you want to talk about this, and I am going to try to share my screen and bring up some information.
Yeah, for those who weren't able to join us yesterday on the Clinical Consultation Network, we had Dr. Mary Margaret Phil as a guest on there. She's with the Department of Health. She is an actual epidemiologist, and she came on and talked to us a lot about what is going on within the Department of Health and the testing strategies and this type of thing. I wouldn't be surprised if in the near future there are some adjustments in the testing process. And part of this is getting things right-sized, I think. You know, we've had some pretty strong approaches to this in mass testing. And now I think that there might be an opportunity to narrow that a bit, to right-size it, to get it where we need it to be. One of the things I'll bring your attention to, Kara, have you been able to share the screen? I just wanted to make sure.
I believe everyone should be able to see it right now.
Okay, so if you look at this screen and you look across, and I encourage people, you know, spend a few minutes after 2 o'clock every day when the Department of Health updates these numbers so that you're able to track how things are going. One of the big things to look at, if you move over to the fourth column there where it says tests, and so they did 11,828 tests yesterday. But if you go down below, they've started publishing the positivity rate. And so there's a 7.55% positivity rate for yesterday. Well, these were the data that were posted yesterday. And so that was a 7.55 positivity rate. Generally, if that positivity rate's running between 6 and 8%, they feel pretty good about the idea that they're doing enough testing. And so what I would encourage agencies to do is to look at, as you're doing this testing of all your staff right now, look at what your positivity rates are and, kind of gauge that. It's really, if it gets too low, we might be over testing. If it gets too high, that positivity rate, then we might be under testing in those circumstances. And if it gets too high, we also probably have identified an area where there's sort of an outbreak. And so under those circumstances, there's probably a greater need for testing. And so I encourage you to collect these data about your particular location. And if you end up with a positivity rate that's pretty high, that is something you definitely want to report to the Department of Health. And I would like you to also report that to me as well, so that we can be tracking with that and assisting you in whatever way that we can. So that I think that the Everly Well testing has worked out well. I think it has been a very good program. I would not be surprised if there were some adjustments in the near future as it relates to that, but we will have to wait and see and respond to guidance from the Department of Health. Kara?
All right, thank you very much. Okay, we have more questions, so we'll go through those. And I am apparently having a phone issue now, so let me just see what that is. Okay, let's give this another try. All right. The next question is, will the IDD integration plan include expansion of the use of EVV, or will it remain limited to only the services required under the Cures Act? We have brought Kimberly Black on to this, and she is going to provide an answer to this question.
Good morning, everyone. So we are not expanding the services as a part of integration. The services are going to remain limited to personal assistance and respite. However, the scope of EVV will expand for the 1915C waivers to include verification of services through confirmed visits in the EVV system before billing can occur. So it's going to be really important for providers to work with your staff on making sure that they call in and out using the EVV system when reporting to work. And also it's going to be very important for providers to complete their visit maintenance prior to the billing cycle, so that you can bill on the schedule that you need to. One other thing that we'll be expanding is that we're going to be looking at overlapping visits, just to make sure that staff are not working in multiple places at once, or obviously they can't be working in multiple places at once. So making sure they're not checking in and checking out at different locations, and that they're where they're supposed to be. So, and that's the extent of the expansion for the first round of integration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kimberly, for letting us put you on the spot, add you as a panelist, and make you answer a question about EVV. So we appreciate that. Next question, also integration. So going to bring this back to Jordan Allen and maybe a little bit of Deputy Commissioner Kidd. I'll let them decide how to handle it. But how will billing for 1915C, ECF, and ICF services be integrated? Jordan.
Sure, thanks, Kara. So as we've communicated already, ultimately the plan will be to have a single point of billing across all systems. Certainly, the development efforts, the build, the contracting of those services, that stuff is still in the very preliminary phases. We certainly are meeting with our IT folks and with the managed care organizations and TennCare to begin to talk about logistically how we can align all of the billing into a single system. As we get information on that, as you can imagine, with all of those systems needing and getting all the way down into the granular detail, with all of those systems needing to be able to talk to one another, to be able to share data, to present an individual interface for provider agencies across the system, just the logistics of those behind the scenes communication pathways are quite complicated. And so there certainly we are 100% committed to developing a single billing system that stretches across all programs. As we have information about that billing system, or if we get any real substantive leads on what that system might look like, whether or not that will be an existing system, an internal build, or like I said, contracting with a vendor to do that, we'll communicate that information. We're just not there yet. But what I can assure you is it's a major point of focus for us right now. We're meeting hours and hours on end each week to try to figure out the logistics behind the scene before we begin to bring any of the concepts or ideas to the table, or before we're able to solicit additional feedback as to what an interface, a provider interface might look like. What we know right now from the feedback we've received is that across the network, it was one of the predominant desires of the alignment process to unify a single point of billing, and we're acting on that as we speak. I don't know if Deputy Commissioner Kidd has anything he wants to add.
No, Jordan, I think you got it. Thank you.
Okay, our next question is also about the integration plan, and it is how will ICF services be impacted by the integration plan? Jordan, back to you.
I'm sorry, Kara, can you repeat that one? I missed it.
Absolutely. It was how will ICF services be impacted by the integration plan?
Sure. Yeah, so again, I think consistent with the way we've communicated, what we know right now is that by or after 7/1/21, we're going to work on an aligned admissions process. And so that's just developing criteria by which people would be reviewed for ICF admission. Obviously, we'll be doing that in concert with the ICF provider community. I certainly think that we want to have conversations about how we best assure that people receiving ICF services are receiving those services because they absolutely have to have them and they can't be in more integrated service settings. That's a conversation that we've been involved in for years and years at this point. I think we have the opportunity now under the alignment with ICF services falling underneath the umbrella of that alignment process to have that conversation in a more robust way and certainly in a more unified way. So we want to do that. Certainly, I think we need to have conversations about whether or not we can begin to utilize ICF bed capacity to help fill the gap between institutionalization in mental health centers and folks who need some supports that also have co-occurring diagnosis or behavioral health needs, and whether or not we can use that ICF program as somewhat of a transitional benefit for that group of people. So I think the opportunities are abound. What we know right now on the front end is that designing an admissions process that is consistent across all of ICF services seems to be of paramount importance, and that's where we'll begin.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jordan. And stay here because the next question is also about IDD integration. Has there been any consideration of how implementation could be affected if COVID restrictions remain in play into 2021? So Jordan, back to you.
Yeah, I think that as it pertains specifically to the alignment process, that it's not, the current COVID environment is not deeply impactful. Obviously, it has impacted program services across all of HCBS in the same way. People, need to be very careful about observing the appropriate safeguards and social distancing, and that's impacted people's ability to get out into the community and receive some of the services, obviously, that they were receiving in a pre-COVID environment. I don't think at this point any of the health professionals believe that we're going to see a dramatic change in the service environment, at least as it applies to the impact of COVID in the foreseeable future. So I think what we need to do is continue to plan from a policy and a service standpoint that we're going to be operating in some kind of modified environment for the months to come and perhaps longer. Certainly we all want to see the COVID epidemic begin to wane and then come to an end, but I don't think that there's any realistic expectation that that's going to happen anytime soon. So as it applies to, for instance, the development of a single point of billing, or as it applies to the work that we're already engaged in right now to align case management services, as it applies to workforce development and some of the other concepts that we've talked about, COVID won't impact any of those actions in any different way than it's impacting those actions now. I think when we get questions about, are we considering delaying implementation because of COVID, I think those questions are more pointed or more directly attuned to very direct service change questions. And as we've indicated, changes to services and single program design discussion, things that will substantively affect the way people receive services and the way providers administer those services, those discussions will begin now in the next several months. And so I don't anticipate that there'll be any different impact as it pertains to COVID on services than there is today. So I don't think there's a real direct link, and I certainly don't think we're planning on pausing any of the discussions or any of the work that we're engaged in or plan to do based on the fact that this COVID environment doesn't appear to be changing anytime soon.
Thank you very much, Jordan, for that. Okay, next question, stay on the line. How will IBD program integration as outlined in the concept plan impact blended homes? Jordan?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that is something that we're talking about right now. Obviously, as we've indicated thus far, from a service standpoint, changes in the 1915C waiver and the ECF waiver as it relates to the alignment are fairly muted. There's no plans at this point to make dramatic changes to either of those service environments, which means that the impact on CLS blended home environments will remain fairly minimal also. So I think 7/1/21 and the months that pass that, as we begin to engage in discussions about program design and again, discussions about how services may be modified, certainly we've made no bones about the fact that we want to actively participate in better developing opportunities for people to utilize enabling technologies and supports that allow them to be more independent. As we begin to work through those discussions and as we begin to produce ideas and concepts around that, then certainly there'll be some impact in those blended homes. But as it pertains to right now and the plans that we have between now and 7/1/21, the impact will be very minimal.
Thanks, Jordan. Okay, so the next question is, I'm going to start with Jordan, and then I think Dr. Davis might have something else he might want to add to this. We have this provider has several service recipients that are asking to go back to work or asking to apply for jobs so they can work. When the state of Tennessee closed down to limit community exposure, the agency didn't allow people to work. Later, the stay-at-home orders were relaxed, and they had one person supported go back to work, and 2 others were asking. The question is can a provider not allow recipients to work to prevent the spread of COVID and limit exposure to the virus? Jordan, I think you might want to add, discuss this, and then I think Dr. Davis would like to add something as well.
Sure. So the first thing that I'd be remiss if I didn't point out, and I think it's very important in this conversation, is that we have at no time, nor would we, prohibit people from working or prohibit people from exercising their choice and opportunity to engage in community environments. Obviously, at the point at which a stay-at-home order was issued, that extends beyond the department's policy jurisdiction. We're currently operating in and will continue to operate in an environment where all services available to people supported continue to be available. What we've done is encourage people, and in fact, we've provided some tools and guidance to help people make informed decisions about how it is they're engaging in their community. We discussed very early on in the onset of the pandemic the fact that there are differing conditions on almost a county by county basis. And so in some counties, there's been a more prolific rise in the number of people, for instance, that are diagnosed with COVID-19 than in other communities. And those kind of individualized discussions and those kind of individualized decisions need to continue for the time being and again into the foreseeable future. We are not saying that people cannot work. We're not even saying people should not work. What we're saying is that people need to make those decisions, them and their circle need to make those decisions in an informed environment. And so utilizing tools like the risk benefit tool that we provided and continuing to follow CDC and state guidance as it relates to the way people are interacting in their communities is paramount in that endeavor. If people are working or people want to work or people have stopped working but have the availability to go back to work, or for that matter, if people are just wanting to get back to engagement in their community, which we've received multiple communications. In fact, we're receiving those weekly from people and families saying, hey, when can I go back to whatever it is they like to do in the community? What's important is that we're providing an environment of informed decision-making for those people, but understand that the department has not modified the availability of services in any way. We just need you, your provider, your family, and your circle to make the decision that's best for you based on your personal conditions and based on your personal level of comfort in doing so. Dr. Davis?
Yeah, the main thing I wanted to say about this is I fully support people's right to go to work and to engage in their community. The thing we want to be doing with folks that we support out there, though, is also helping them understand their responsibilities in this circumstance. And so, you know, I think every agency needs to engage in a teaching program with their person supported, with their staff, about responsible behavior under the circumstances we're facing right now. And I'm sorry to say, but this involves wearing a mask. This is one of the most basic things that Dr. Phil talked about yesterday on the Clinical Consultation Network, was that everyone needs to be wearing a mask, and there is no question about the evidence on this, that it does reduce the likelihood that you will pass along COVID-19 or that you will contract COVID-19. So wearing a mask, and really, you know, the recommendation that we have made to agencies is that staff need to be wearing a mask at all times during their work, and that when people go to work and that they're going to be placed within 6 feet of other people, that they should be wearing a mask. And really, even if you're not within 6 feet, but you're in a congregate environment, you should be wearing a mask anyway. All of these things are of critical importance. We need to be teaching people to wash their hands. We need to be teaching people to observe that 6 foot distance. These are just basics that we're going to have to live with for an extended period of time. And so I encourage every agency to engage in that training. And so if you have people going to work, you need to help them understand those responsibilities and to help them um, learn to do the things that they need to do to protect themselves and others. Thank you, Kara.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Dr. Davis and Jordan. So our next thing is we have no more questions. However, Teresa Sloan would like to take the opportunity to address a letter that several providers have received and just give you all some information about that. So Teresa, if you would like to discuss that, please do.
Thanks, Kara. I had a few providers reach out to me yesterday regarding a letter that providers are receiving from Disability Rights Tennessee requesting some information. Basically, the correspondence I received were asking whether or not providers could or should provide that information. The answer to that question is yes, that they're entitled to that information under federal statute, federal law. So you should provide that information. I am going to ask you, however, if you could send what the response that you send to Disability Rights Tennessee and any information, if you could also send that to Simone Carino at DIDD. We want to be proactive and look at the information as well to see if there are any concerns or issues or trends or any way that we can assist providers with being able to answer or respond to those questions in a thoughtful manner and provide what's being asked for. That's it, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So our next question, we're running out of time, but we did get a question in the chat box about how can agencies get PPE. We have Deputy Commissioner Kidd here with us, so he'll discuss, and I think he's got a website that I'm going to pull up for you all to see.
Yeah, thanks, Kara, and good morning, everybody. So Kara's pulling up the link to the COVID website that you can go to look at providers that provide PPE to the state of Tennessee and that they've recommended and have been verified that can actually provide the PPE to the providers or anybody else in any other businesses. So if Carol pull that up, you should be able to see it.
Sorry, I do not have presenter rights as of right now, but we will get that taken care of, and I will pull this up in just a second.
Yeah, and then we'll provide the link in the chat box as well.
Okay, it's coming up right now, so just give me a second. Okay, here it is, the Ppe Vendor Directory. Andy, you want to tell people what we're looking at right now?
Yeah, sure thing. So you can actually, go through this and look at to see what type of products you need. Obviously, see the pricing there, and then either go to their website via the link through the Buy Now or email me. And as I mentioned, all these vendors have actually been verified from the state of Tennessee through TEMA, so that you have confidence that they can provide it. Thanks, Kara.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I hope you all were able to see that. Okay. We have many questions. We have some questions. Let me see if I can get to them. Has the Quilt Score Competency Program been officially launched? Is it at the TCAS or the community colleges? Jordan, do you know the answer of this? This is primarily a TennCare steered effort.
Yeah, there are probably folks on this call today that are on that quilts work group that have a better indication. I do not believe, in fact, I'm fairly certain that quilts program, the DSP credentialing program, has not launched yet. I know there are some new ideas on the table, in fact, one of which was brought to the table by a provider agency yesterday during the meeting that has been forwarded onto the quilts group. So that work is ongoing. I could be wrong, and certainly if I am, please correct me, but I do not believe that program has formally launched as of yet.
Sorry, I was on mute. We got a question sent privately. So Jordan, this one is going to be for you. Our agency provides services for ECF 1915 choices, and we are newly approved for Katie Beckett. To date, we have been operating with one policy and procedures manual that incorporates required policies per service per waiver. During our ECF audit this past June, we were told to separate our ECF policies from our other program policies. With the upcoming alignment of services, what will the requirements for our policy and procedures be? Jordan, do you want to take this question on?
Sure. It's a really good point, and I think it's probably a foundational component of the alignment effort. So obviously, you know, once we get to a point where we have a single system across the HCBS service network, there'll be a single set of regulations, a single set of policies that provider agencies will have in order to govern those services. At this time and for the foreseeable future, as arduous as it is, you'll need to maintain separate policies for each program. I know the credentialing requirements, the quality review requirements for the ECF program and the 1915C program remain enough different that there are different policies and approaches that are required. I would encourage you to maintain those, and if you need to maintain those separately for the time being, then that's the course that you should take. Certainly, at the end of all this, down at the end of the road, there'll be a single set, and we hope that is a single set that fairly dramatically reduces administrative burden and allows you guys to focus on what you do best, which is support people.
Okay, thanks, Jordan. We have time for one more question, so I'm going to get to the one in the Q&A box. And it is, what did Bruce say was a high positivity rate? Dr. Davis, do you want to just repeat that?
Oh, yeah, I'm glad I'm going to get another opportunity, because there was something I wanted to mention when I was talking before that I did not mention, which is that everyone should make it a priority to get a flu shot. I did that thing where you're asking me one question and I answered a different question, but I wanted to make sure that people were reminded of that, because that's of critical importance as we move into the winter months. And then the question that you were just asking me was, now I've forgotten what it was. Remind me what the question was, Kara.
What is a high positivity rate?
Oh, yeah. So generally, they like for that positivity rate to be between 5 and 8%. So if it gets up above 8%, you start worrying about that. Certainly, if it gets up into the double digits, you're worried about that you're having a little bit higher positivity rate than would be expected. And so, you know, that would be a general rule of thumb for looking at those data for your agency. Kara.
Okay, we have used every single minute of office hours today because we've got lots of questions. And just so you all know, we will always make time to get to the questions that are submitted beforehand. So please do submit those questions where you can beforehand, because obviously we spent a lot of time discussing those today. So with that, I am going to, with our last 2 minutes, turn it back over to Commissioner Turner to say a few closing words, and hope you guys liked this new format. Please provide us with some feedback on it, and we appreciate all of you. Commissioner.
Yeah, thanks, Kara. That was great. I really appreciate the rapid fire there. Thank you for submitting a lot of those questions. Again, at the end of the day, as we've shared early on, when we began the office hours, the whole point of this is built around transparency and communication and partnering together on what the messaging looks like. And the more that I think we have these types of honest discussions, I think it's going to benefit all of us. So thank you again for participating and sending those questions. As Kara said, we don't just pay attention to these questions 5 minutes before we kick off at 9:30. These are conversations that we take throughout the week to make sure that we're best prepared to help serve you on Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock. So when you do submit these questions, please understand that all of the executive leadership is involved in discussing them and making sure that we're providing you with good, solid answers that allows you to have some sense of normalcy and engagement around what the leadership at DIDD is doing. So thank you again for those questions. And we're going to continue to make sure that we partner with you at a very high level to get you the answers that you need and that you deserve. So I'm looking forward to it again next week. With that, I'll turn it back to Kara. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. And just to echo what Commissioner Turner said, not only do we hope you find these office hours helpful in getting your questions answered, but it also allows us an opportunity to understand what your concerns are so that we can do what we can to try and address them and make sure you have all of the information you need during this very weird time. All right, like I said, provide feedback on this new format if you would so that we know what you all think. And we appreciate all of you, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Bye.